Thank you. I thank my colleague from Michigan, Mr. Levin, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker. I thank my colleague for calling this special order and giving me the opportunity to speak on the House of Representatives about an issue of concern to the people of my district and the people throughout the world who care about human rights. Mr. Speaker, as you know, 8 years ago this month, the Soviet Union invaded Afghanistan. To no one's surprise, the occupation of Afghanistan has turned into a bloody war with no victors, only losers. The Soviets have suffered over 30,000 casualties and spent close to $3 billion a year to fight this Vietnam-like war that has no end in sight. But what about the people of Afghanistan? Some reports indicate that 1.5 million Afghans have lost their lives due to the Soviet invasion and occupation. 1 out of every 3 Afghans has left the country since the Soviets marched in 1979. Imagine if 80 million Americans fled our country for refuge in Canada and Mexico. Today, fully 1 out of 2 refugees in the world is an Afghan. This is the legacy of the Soviet intervention in Afghanistan. The Soviets' flagrant disregard for human rights in this country has not gone unnoticed. A report based on interviews with Afghan refugees issued by the Independent Council on International Human Rights, a group of human rights lawyers from the United States, Britain, Sweden, and Malta, documents countless acts of terror perpetrated against the Afghan people. The report tells of widespread use of torture by the government's secret police, massacres and summary executions of civilians by Soviet troops, and the deportation of Afghan children to the Soviet Union. Soviet troops are systematically destroying villages, burning crops, and poisoning water supplies, as you have heard this evening. It is clear the Soviet Union is trying to destroy traditional Afghan society. These atrocities must be stopped, and the people of Afghanistan must be given the right to determine their country's future. I firmly believe that all peoples and countries must be allowed the right to self-determination. The fact that Afghanistan is located on the Soviet border should not preclude this right. One issue on the recent Reagan-Gorbachev summit agenda was the resolution of regional conflicts. Unfortunately, the summit meeting between President Reagan and General Secretary Gorbachev accomplished little in the form of an agreement on Afghanistan. Reports indicate that when the President brought up the subject of Afghanistan, the General Secretary dismissed it as a topic of true dialogue. Various statements by high-ranking Soviet officials, including Mr. Gorbachev, have made reference to a Soviet desire to withdraw from Afghanistan and end this pointless 8-year debacle. Statements, however, are not enough. Real questions of how and when the Soviets withdraw from Afghanistan, what they leave behind, and the repatriation of Afghan refugees must be addressed and acted on. In order to stop this tragic and senseless bloodbath, the Soviets should leave Afghanistan immediately. I urge the Reagan administration to press hard on this issue in the next summit meeting between President Reagan and Mr. Gorbachev. Let's return the country of Afghanistan to its rightful occupants, the people of Afghanistan. Again, I thank my colleague from Michigan for calling for this special order, and I thank you, Mr. Speaker.
I'd like to thank you, and as we leave this subject, just reiterate a few of the statistics that you mentioned. Over 1 million Afghans